I'm Kristen Russell, and this is the Holy Empowered Podcast, where we dive into all things holistic healing and open our minds, hearts, and paradigms to new ideas so we can live our most empowered, healthy, joyful lives. One more thing I wanted to ask you, because you've talked about before just all these different ways to connect with God. And I
Oh
think
yeah,
that's
yeah,
so valuable because there's so many different ways to pray and there's so many different ways to
yeah,
connect.
yeah,
Um, would you want to go over some that you have, as many as you want? Just to give people
yeah,
an idea, like if you're trying to connect to God, whether you're religious or not, trying to connect to a higher power,
yeah,
what's a good way to do that on a more soul level?
yeah. You might regret asking that question. I have so much to say. I'm going to try to keep this very, very brief.
You're fine.
Um, well, first off, Kristen, I love the invitation that if there is a benevolent force in the universe, and if it really does love us, then it does want to be connected to us. And so, just embedded in your question is the implication that it's possible that we can be connected to this benevolence that's bigger than us. And that alone is a really beautiful, inspiring idea. We could do an hour-long podcast just about this, but let me say a few brief things. I heard somebody say once that if God loves you and wants to be connected to you, and if God wants to get at you, and again, when I say God, I just mean cosmic love, the source, like if God really wants to get at you, it's most likely to happen in the stillness. And what you said earlier, I think is just so profound about getting to the subconscious level. And so I've been studying this a lot, listening to a lot of people, Cynthia Bourgeault, Thomas Keating, Richard Rohr, and actually going all the way back into the Middle Ages, into Bonaventure, and just okay, there are so many different types of prayer. Most people don't even know this. Real quickly, there's petitionary prayer. That's your standard, dear God, please bless me with this. Like that's petitionary prayer. Most people are aware of petitionary prayer. Something that's been going on for literally thousands of years that's somewhat been lost in the Christian tradition, not entirely, but is praying the Psalms. There's something that comes out of the Eastern Orthodox tradition. It's called the Hesychastic prayer. And I'm not going to define any of these. I'm just going to list them off. So, okay, petitionary prayer, praying the Psalms, Hesychastic prayer. There's prayers of gratitude. There are meditative prayers. There is contemplative prayer, and there's two or three others that, I haven't studied enough to give you any intelligent comments, but I now believe that they all have a place. I don't want anybody to abandon any of their prayer practices, but I do believe that the pinnacle form of prayer is contemplation. And I want to be a little precise in my answer. Some people think that contemplation and meditation and mindfulness is all the exact same thing, and it's not. And Bonaventure, I think, gives us the roadmap. Bonaventure says, so, and he was writing in Latin, right? So there was meditatio and there was contemplatio. Meditatio meant to turn something over in your mind. So meditatio means to actually focus on and think about something. So, and if you think about meditation, that's what you do. In meditation, you might focus on something in nature. You might focus on breathing. You might focus on how the chair feels. Like this is kind of a very Buddhist approach, by the way, to mindfulness is a focused meditation. Okay, so meditation means you're still actively thinking. Contemplatio, so meditatio meant to turn it over. Contemplatio meant to empty the mind. And those are very different things. So meditation is to ponder on and actively think about something. Contemplation is to actually empty the mind and simply make space for God. And what Bonaventure says is you meditate your way to contemplation.
Mm.
And a good way to think about it, Kristen, is think of a continuum from active to passive prayer. So, like petitionary prayer is a super active prayer. You're vocalizing, you're on your knees, you're saying thanks, you're asking for things. That's a very active prayer. As you move into praying the Psalms and hesychastic prayer, these are more memorized prayers, still active, not as active. Meditation probably pushes you a little bit more towards passive. You're still active in the sense that you're thinking and focusing, but the ultimate aim is to get to that contemplative state. And then in the contemplative state, I mean, I should be careful about what I say here. Let me just say this. In the contemplative state, you might experience a state of peace. You might experience a state of harmony with all of creation, and you might experience a connection with the benevolent presence that's bigger than us in the universe. So I'm a really big believer that if you can work towards a state of contemplation, passivity and stillness, that's where some good things can happen. But can I give one caveat on that? Because all of the great teachers of contemplative prayer will tell you the same thing right away. You should expect this thing to suck for a while and episodically. In fact, John of the Cross was very clear about this. St. John of the Cross, who was a contemporary of Teresa of Avila, John of the Cross was like, hey, in fact, have you ever heard of the phrase dark night of the soul? You can just nod your head if you've heard that phrase. Okay. Dark night of the soul comes from John of the Cross, and we completely misuse it these days. These days, we use dark night of the soul to mean I'm going through a faith crisis. That's not what he meant. What he meant was the closer you get to God, you will experience what's called a final purgation, meaning God needs to know, get a load of this. I actually think this is beautiful. God needs to know that you're not interested in God just because of the cool things God can do for you. God needs to know that you want a relationship with that divine loving presence, even if that divine loving presence can't offer you anything. Because that's true love. True love is, I don't expect anything from you. I'm here to give you my presence. So what John of the Cross said is, you should expect as you go through this journey and you get into a contemplative state, you might experience peace, you might experience harmony, you might experience connection with divine love, but you'll also experience purgation. You'll experience darkness because God needs to know that you're here for love and presence and not for all of the blessings that God can give you. So my short answer is stillness, contemplation. It might involve meditation. It might involve the Psalms. It might involve hesychastic prayer. It might involve petitionary prayer. Contemplative prayer and stillness is the answer, but don't expect it to all be, gumdrops and unicorns along the way. Sorry, that was kind of a long answer.
No, that's great. That's what I wanted. What you were explaining is how that's been when I've had the most profound experiences with the Creator, is meditation to contemplation
Yeah.
and just allowing space to receive.
And Kristen, I want to put it out there. I I think this could be helpful for people because there are a lot of people that use meditation, stillness, mindfulness, and contemplation synonymously, and they're not the same. And I want to name contemplation is the stripping away of consciousness to get to subconscious, where you are present, you are just being. You're not thinking, you're not problem solving, you're not thinking of your next sermon, you're not even focusing on a leaf, you're not focusing on even the breath at that point. You've gone to a deeper place of in how you just described it. And so I think it's a beautiful idea that could be helpful to people that meditation can get you to that subconscious just state of being. It's just true being. That's what it is. It's just true being.
Yeah. No, I love that. And I feel like often people get intimidated by meditation because they think it's that. They think it's contemplation.
Yeah.
And it
It's
takes
different.
time to get there.
Yes.
Like
And it doesn't happen every time, right? Like
yeah.
give yourself grace. And I would say this, have no expectations going into it. Like don't say to yourself, well, Colby and Kristen described it this way, and so I guess I've got it. No, it's like have no expectation. Just hear what Kristen just told you. Meditate into contemplation, and that gets you to pure existence, and just go for it. Like go on the journey. Go find it yourself and give yourself grace.
Yeah. No, that's great. Thank you, Colby.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Yeah. No, I was hoping with this episode people could just kind of see the spiritual side of healing and
Mm,
find ways to connect more with their higher power. So I feel like given them a little, I don't know. We've given them. We're so benevolent. No, we I feel like this has been a really good conversation that's covered a lot of different aspects of this. And
I've enjoyed it, and
yeah, yeah.
every time we talk, you point something out, you have an insight, you have a way of saying something that just really lands for me and takes my understanding farther down the road. And so I just appreciate it. Appreciate the work
Oh,
that you do.
well, thank you. I feel the same way about you. And every time I listen to your podcast, I'm like crying in the corner,
Oh,
not
unfortunately,
in
I
the
am
corner.
too when I do the podcast.
Well, we're feeling things, so that's
Yeah,
good.
yeah, we are feeling things.
Um, so I wanted to one more question. Do you have any books or resources, just something you'd recommend to people that might help them on their path?
Sorry, I'm pausing because I've read and listened to so much stuff, and I feel
Yeah.
like it kind of depends on where you're at. Like, I sort of, when people come into the office and they explain what's going on and what they're thinking, I kind
Mhm.
of feel like, oh, here's the book for you, or here's the
Mm.
podcast for you. But I
Oh,
will say this, like here's a book that I love that a lot of people have read, The Wisdom Jesus by Cynthia Bourgeault. I just think it's a really beautiful kind of modern approach to Jesus and healing and thinking about God differently. So that's one book I would recommend. Cynthia Bourgeault is just full of wisdom. I think anything from Richard Rohr is awesome. And then Julian of Norwich, Revelations of Divine Love, I think is worth a read. And the translation I recommend is Mirabai's Star. So yeah, Cynthia Bourgeault, Richard Rohr, Julian of Norwich. Can't go wrong with any of that.
wonderful.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. And tell us about what's your podcast name,
Yeah,
your
thanks.
book, how do people find you? How
Yeah,
do
yeah,
people get in
yeah.
touch with you?
I'm hard to find actually. My podcast is Awesome Books About God and Jesus with Uncle Colby. So again, that's Awesome Books About God and Jesus with Uncle Colby. I really don't have an online presence, and I wrote this book for my kids a while back. It's called The One with the Tiger on the Boat. I actually did put my heart and soul into it. I don't know how much it helps adults or whatever, but if they want to get in touch with me, they can email me. It's colby.wright@byu.edu. So colby.wright@byu.edu. And just, Kristen, thanks. You're a beautiful human being.
Yeah.
This has been awesome. I've enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you so much for listening. If you are enjoying Holy Empowered, share it with that friend or on your socials. You can also hit the follow button if you want to keep up with the latest episodes. Until next time, stay empowered.